With so many home sellers selling their home and also having to buy at the same time, a lot of times they can lose their mind. So Tara and I are going to talk about today how not to lose your mind during this process because it can be very, very stressful.
It can be, and sometimes it's easier said than done to not lose your mind, but there's lots of steps that you as a buyer or seller can implement to just make the process go totally easier. And obviously that comes with partnership with your realtor too, but we're going to talk today about some strategies surrounding the buy and sell.
Yeah, this has become much more common because, during, the COVID era and when real estate was just flying off the shelves, people were just buying something and then selling their house. It was kind of like a one at a time thing, right? I'm just going to buy a house, slowly move all my stuff over and then just, sell my place. And that was so much easier for sellers because now that the market is so much slower, most people are having to sell their home first and then go buy something. And that can be really overwhelming because a lot of times you have two transactions going on at the same time.
Yeah, so some of the concerns, it's like, what if I can't sell my house if I find one? Or what if I buy a house and my house doesn't sell? There's just all of these puzzle pieces that need to be put in order for things to go smoothly, not to mention the whole financial piece of that. If you're carrying two properties or need the funds from one to fund the other, and how do you unlock some of that equity? You might have a lot of equity, but not the cash to do it. So we'll talk about that today.
Yeah. And, you can really screw this up as a seller. And, it really is sitting down and knowing your numbers. Because what you need to understand is how much money you need to walk away with, okay, in order to buy your next property. So, you might not know exactly how much your next property is going to be because maybe you have not yet selected it, but you need to know an approximate amount that you're going to spend. And then that way you know how much you need to net. And a seller might think, okay, I owe $100,000 on my mortgage. I'm selling my home for $400,000, so I'm going to get 300. But it's not that easy because you have your realtor commission. You usually have the buyer's realtor's commission. You have part of the closing costs. If the buyer wants anything repaired or any work done or any credits, you're going to have to credit them money. So you need to know I always feel they need to know their number, that they're okay walking away from the house with. And then if it ends up being more, great. But that way you're always solving to that. And, it's important that you know that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's especially even like with taxes. Yes, if it's your primary residence and you've lived there 2 years or longer, then you're kind of in the clear. But if you haven't lived in a property 2 years, you need to talk to your tax person about that too, because that's a whole nother thing that will drastically affect your net proceeds.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And I know people hate numbers and they want to just be excited to sell and excited to buy. But, the first thing you need to do is that. Now, There's three main ways that you can buy and sell at the same time. And one of them, and this is the one that is probably the most common right now, I would say, or at least what I'm seeing, is selling first and then going and buying a home. So that way you know how much money you made, you know how much you have to spend on your next home. But it's chaotic still because if you sell first, you're going to have to rent your home back from the new buyer, or you're going to have to temporarily move. The chances of your house closing on the same day as the house you're buying is just about non-existent. So you're going to have this transition where you're going to have to move 2 different times or rent your house back.
Yeah. And one thing that we see in our market, I'm curious if you see it in yours, we see sellers negotiating for their closing date, like hard. So right now I've got sellers that they haven't found where their next home is going to be yet, but they're being a buyer in such a seller's market. So they want to make the most competitive offer they can. So it's like, hey, technically we're home sale contingent, but it's already under contract type of thing. So the buyers of their home right now that they need to sell we're pushing out the closing date like 3 or 4 months to get them time to find a house and move so they don't have to move twice. Technically, their house is sold and under contract. We can get through the inspection and all of those contingencies. And if the buyer wants their property enough, they're going to wait. They're going to wait for it.
See, we're just in such a buyer's market right now in Phoenix that
Really?
the sellers don't have that option. They actually are just trying to offload it and are just it's taking longer than they anticipated, right? So they thought, oh, I'll sell my house in a month or two. Well, 5 months later, they finally sell it. So they're already behind their timeline. But
Interesting.
it is not the kind of market here where you're going to dictate a buyer. You're basically having to kiss the buyer's butt. Whatever the buyer needs is kind of what you're going to do. And a lot of buyers, I mean, you know, there is an option to try to rent back your property, but a lot of sellers don't like to do that because, you know, they felt like, okay, I just bought this. I don't want to take proceeds out of what I just bought and have to lease it back. Plus, a lot of buyers, like people that are buying their home, they want to move in and they don't want somebody else living there because they're not landlords, you know, typically, right?
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, you could damage something or break something, or I don't want to be a landlord for 2 months while you find a place. So what we're seeing a lot now is sellers having to do like a transitionary move. So I know I'm buying up personally a property right now, and like the sellers are going to go live with their parents, you know, with their 4 kids, you know what I mean? Because
which is like, it's great for you, but not great for them.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, I know that, you know, but at the same time, like they didn't ask for a long, like I told them, like, if you want to delay close, like I'm happy to do it because I'm not really in any rush to have this property. But they were like, no, we just want to close and be done. Because I think there's this PTSD in the Phoenix market, at least, where, you know, there's about 16 to 20% of deals falling out of contract right now.
Really?
And
Wow.
Yeah. And I think that there's this PTSD of like, no, I want money in hand. Here's the house. I want to, you know, look for my next home. So, you know, we're not really seeing that on our end.
Have you seen an increase, if that's the case, with contracts falling out, you know, maybe more than a normal time? Have you seen an increase in earnest money being put down or non-refundable earnest money or anything like that?
I haven't. So I did that actually on the one I just bought because they listed it low and it was very competitive. So I put down 15 grand refundable, not non-refundable, but 15 grand down instead of 5. Because I'm like, you know, I know that I want the place unless the inspection finds something, right? And I think that helps. But no, we're not really seeing that in this market. Like our market is definitely slow right now. I mean, it's definitely picked up since last year, but it's still slow. And, you know, our inventory is still, you know, fairly high and buyers have options. And so that's why I don't really recommend, I've been recommending everybody that's selling with me to stay put on buying something until we see what their house sells for. Because I don't think it's a good situation to be in a place where you're having to carry 2 mortgages in this market, because your house might sit for 6 or 8 months and you also might have to lower the price, even if you're not anticipating to, in order to get it sold. I mean, I just had a buyer offer on a home last night. We got the deal accepted this morning, but the other realtor, the other realtor was telling me, you know, they started at 600, then they went, which was too high. They started too high, but they went to 565, which is probably about right. But because they had already had so many days on market, they had to, they got no traction and they moved. So it's empty. It's vacant. So they dropped it to 540. And then we made an offer for 520, which they countered at 525, and we came to an agreement. However, the other agent told me that they're so mad they lost money because they bought that house 3 years ago for 565. So they lost money. And so they're very unhappy about it. So I guess my point in all of that is that it doesn't always go, you know, they had already bought a house in Vegas. They had already moved. They probably bought that house anticipating to sell this house for at least 600 or what they paid for it, 565. Well, now they're negative, but you have to remember, I know you know this, but they're not just negative on the purchase price. They also have to pay my commission and the other realtor's commission. So that's another $30,000. So now you have to understand that they're, you know, 45,000 or 35,000 negative plus another 30 grand in realtor fees. So that's $65,000 negative. So it's a pinch, you know, like that's the thing is that's why I prefer the sell before the buy in this market. If you would have asked me during COVID, I would have said, go buy something because it's so hard to get an offer accepted. And then we're going to sell your house in 2 weeks. So don't worry about it. But now it's very different, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. And that's interesting to hear how it is in other parts of the country, which is just an important reminder that real estate is so local.
it is.
It's not quite that way here. It's still definitely a seller's market. It's not as extreme as COVID by any means, but
Mm-hmm.
it definitely is still a seller's market. So I have had several instances of clients that have done the sell first and then buy, but also the other way around, which we can talk about next.
Yeah, yeah. And so the other option, like I said, in the Phoenix market, I do not normally recommend this. However, there's exceptions, and that would be to buy first and then sell. But there's exceptions, because if there's a home that comes up that's such a good deal, or it's your dream home, maybe you weren't even planning on moving, but this opportunity arose, and yeah, you want to probably or possibly, buy first and then sell your home. You just have to understand that there are risks to that.
Yeah. Actually, I have two very recent current instances of that. And the first one is it was a house that really wasn't listed. It was actually a house that I had bought to move into. And then my clients came along and they're like, we wish we were looking a month ago. We really want that house. So they're like, they made me an offer and it worked out. I had done some work to it, but hadn't moved in yet. So they're like, we want it, we'll buy it. And then they wanted the time to be able to move because they had, outbuildings and stuff. They wanted the time to be able to move. So they held both properties for 4 or 5 months. And we just closed on their other house last week. So it's like, that was a perfect scenario for them to be able to work it out, especially when that property comes up that's really hard to find, or a unique property. You don't always have the luxury of selling first and then buying. So it is weighing that risk. And then, sometimes people have equity locked up in their house. So they might not have like the cash to put down on that purchase. So they might do like a line of credit or, a short-term HELOC with knowing the risks that, okay, we might pay on this for 2 months, but it might be 6 months or, whatever time in the market, is relative, but weighing the pros and cons of that. And for these specific clients, it was, we can move slowly. We don't have to rush, and live out of a trailer. So it works great, but it's not for everyone either.
It's not for someone that's tight on cash. Like, it's not for someone that's tight as far as like, okay, I'm going to buy this house. I'm going to sell this one. I can't really support 2 mortgages. So I hope I sell this one really quickly. It's not for that person, because those are the deals that I find with my clients where we get smoking deals on the buy side because it's vacant and the person is moved and they can't support 2 mortgages. So they have to offload it faster. And that really does hurt them. And it can hurt you too, because you think you're going to sell your house for $450,000. You sell your house for $410,000. Well, now you have this $40,000 deficit that you didn't know you had. So maybe if you bought something, say you scaled up to $600,000, you now really don't have the money for that because you kind of planned to put an additional $40,000 towards it that you don't have. So you just have to really, when I have like a lot of young families and stuff that are looking to do this, I'm always very cautious with them. Like, are you sure you can support 2? Like, I would say, can you support 2 mortgages for 1 year? Now, is it going to take a year? Probably not. But that's where your head should be. It shouldn't be, I can afford 2 mortgages for 3 months. That's not a good spot to be in.
No.
Yeah.
No. And then if that's the case, it's like lower the price sooner than later, because not only is it, reducing the price, but you have all of the carrying costs, taxes, insurance, maintenance, HOAs in some parts of the country. So it's not just the $5,000 that you're losing or $10,000 in a reduced purchase price. It's all of the other things, and it can add up so quickly. And I think most people underestimate what those costs are for carrying.
They do. And I think the other thing people underestimate is, if you move, all your furniture is gone unless you're going to pay to stage the home. And unless it's a super luxury home, it's expensive to stage a home. It's about $6,000 and then $2,500 a month. So if you're not selling something that's very expensive, it doesn't make sense to pay that. And when you take all the furniture out, like I just had a guy call me today. He's frustrated. He's not using me as a realtor, but he's frustrated because the place isn't selling. And I said, is it furnished? Because it's kind of it's like $1 million home. And he said, no. And he's like, but people can kind of envision. But I will tell you, when I walk into homes with people, I can envision because I buy homes all the time. You can envision because you buy homes all the time. People cannot envision. Like, we walk into like some home, it's so basic, but it's staged. It's like, oh my God, this home's so nice. You know, we walk in a home that's empty and they're like, well, it looks a little dingy. And, you know, and I'm like, yeah, but if you like put a couch here, and it's hard for people. So if you are going to move all your stuff out, it affects your listing.
Yeah. For sure. It really does. And it's just so interesting to hear the economies of scale in different markets of how much staging is or this or that, because you'll laugh, but around here, most agents have like tubs and totes and boxes at their house for like, okay, like we need a throw blanket or we need a plant or, you know, like to kind of spruce it up, like hand towels, like literally. It's a thing.
I really have, though. I will tell you, I have thought about just having like a storage locker of furniture. And I know someone in Washington that does this just to, because I think with staging, it's not so much it's got to all be cohesive. It's like they just have to see how the space holds the furniture. And so I have thought about getting like little things and getting like a, you know, like a few couches, a dining room table, especially for the main area. Like, I think people can envision bedrooms pretty easily, but the main area, especially on a smaller home, I find bigger homes, it's a little easier because people are, oh, we have plenty of space, but they see this home like 1,500 square feet and they're like, there's not room. Like, how would I use this space? But yet if it had like a cute little dining set and a cute little living room area set, then they would like not feel the same way about it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even things like area rugs, it doesn't even take up much space. But one thing that we've done, and maybe you do it in your market too, but we've done some virtual staging around here, especially for homes where it doesn't pay to bring in, you know, expensive furniture and have that. But it does help with visual because not everybody, like you said, can visualize, which going back to buying versus selling and the sequencing of that, like all of these little things that your realtor does helps speed up that process to the effect that you want it, you know, done or quickly so you can buy and then sell or sell and then buy. Like staging or this or that, like it all helps. It all goes towards the bottom line.
It does. And I actually asked that guy today, I go, does your realtor have, you know, staged photos online of, you know, like the virtual staging? I mean, AI now, you can throw in things. And he said no. And I said, well, that's a good place to start because at least people, when they're looking, can say, okay, this is how it would look if it were staged, you know?
Yeah.
So I do. I think that stuff's important. People don't realize the importance of it. So let's talk about option 3, which is the simultaneous close. It's so interesting that you told me in your market, this is very common. In my market, it's not that common right now because it's taking so long to sell. I don't think it's a bad idea, but it's probably the most stressful.
So it's interesting that you say it's the most stressful because this is literally so commonplace. Like it happens all the time. And right now I've got a middle train car. We talk like the first train car's got to move, the second train car, and the third train car. We're literally coordinating 3 closings on the same day because person, you know, one can move to the first house and then, you know,
oh geez, so
all
you
the way down the line.
Well, see, you guys are so nice up there. You all work with each other so well. Here, everyone's like, if you have to delay, screw you. I'm going to just put it back up on the market and just break the whole train.
No, it's common and it is tricky. And there are obviously, you know, different buyers or seller dynamics, but I think a lot of agents do a good job at explaining like how this works, the pros and the cons. And I mean, us like agents have to work together like, hey, this is why it's delayed a day or whatever it is. And it doesn't always happen. A lot of times they go off without a hitch, but it is definitely teamwork on all fronts, from the realtors to the sellers to the buyers to the title companies. Everybody has to be all hands on deck for them to work smoothly. So
there is risk to this. And actually I'm in the middle of a situation like this myself where it's starting to go sideways. So, but
oh no.
But the risk is a couple things, that the buyer can cancel or they can delay. So if you have a house and you're selling it and you have a buyer and then you're like, I'm going to go buy a house, and you're all, you know, coordinating this closing, and this buyer cancels, So then you can't go buy your house. You have to then cancel. It's kind of like a train of canceling, right? Or you can still close if you can afford it or whatever your situation is. But a lot of times if your buyer cancels, you have to cancel. You know, you could already have done the inspection and been out $1,000. You could have already, you know, put like money down that's non-refundable depending on how you made the offer, which I think that that's important to go over. And you could lose a house that you get really excited about because people get excited when they're going to move, you know, and then it's like, okay, now we can't close on this house. You know, they're not going to wait for us to find another buyer most likely. So you know, it's a lot of things can go sideways. And I think it's especially true in the Phoenix market right now because we're almost up to 20% cancellation rate. So I think that does change things. And that's probably why I'm not seeing it as much because I know a lot of sellers are very hesitant to take a contingent offer here.
Yeah. Or so what we see in our market is like shortening up that contingency period. So maybe instead of a 10-day inspection, it's 5 or 3 or, you know, some whatever time. But other things that we see are like, we'll take backup offers. And there is actually like a formal form to take a formal backup offer that's actually binding. So, you know, there are things or ways to sort of overcome that, but it is a lot of logistics, a lot of communication, and it comes down to relationships.
Do you want to know why I don't like it? Even for myself, like I'm about to tell you my whole situation, but
tell me.
So I think it's not a strong offer, and I like to be really aggressive right now because Phoenix is such a buyer's market. So like I told you, I just got these people, you know, $15,000 off something that was just discounted $15,000.
Yep.
I think when you make contingent offers, you don't have as much leverage as the buyer because it's a contingent offer. So the seller's not super excited about that, especially here when it's taking a long time to sell your property. So I kind of like to wait until one is closed, or like for me, just buy it not contingent on the other one selling. What's happening with me right now is I have a 1031, and this was supposed to be, I sold it cheap because this was supposed to be so easy, and it's turned into something that is not easy. So I have a whole, you know, I've learned a lot of things on this. So anyways, we're under contract and I go put an offer on another property that I'm going to 1031, but I did not make it contingent because I wanted this property irregardless. And the guy was my buyer was supposed to close in 2 weeks. So I had waited till he got through the inspection. You know, I kind of waited a little bit, then I went and made an offer. So he was supposed to close in like a few days, and he decides he no longer wants to buy my condo. So now I have to try to figure out financing because I only did the financing for the amount that I would need after the condo proceeds. So now I have to go back to my lender, and I have to now have another $200,000 in lending that I have to qualify for on a DSCR loan, which is like an investment loan.
Yep. That's service coverage ratio for anybody listening.
Yes. And so they basically, it's like your payment and the rent, and that's what they care about. And it all appraised, and I was able to do it. But then my buyer, mind you, he never signed anything that said he was done. He just verbally told me he was done. And then a couple of days later, he decides he's not done. He still wants to close, but he needs a week extension. So I said, okay, because I left a 2-week gap between. So I had time, right? So he needs a week extension. Like, okay, that's fine. So we come up to the extension period. They're not done with the loan. They need another 2 weeks. So maybe 3. So that's where we're at right now. So I'm waiting to find out tomorrow exactly how much longer they need because I'm like, I can't keep asking for extensions, but I'm going to have to ask the listing agent that I'm working with to buy this home if they will extend it 2 weeks for me. And the issue is they might not. They might tell me to pound sand. They might, maybe, but like maybe they have another cash offer in their back pocket because it was listed really well. I'm not sure. So if they decide to say pound sand, then I have to close, either have to walk away or I'm not going to. So close on this one. But then it doesn't make sense for me to close on my 1031 because I have to pay tax on it. So then I'm going to have to tell my buyer to pound sand. So my point being with all of it is it can turn into a total cluster. It doesn't always go smooth. And so so if you're going to do it, just know that it doesn't always go smoothly.
Yeah, for sure. And it's crazy to hear you talking about it because it's like you're in the trenches right now and
Right
you're
in the
going through all
trenches.
things.
Right in the trenches. And I also have a realtor that has never picked up his damn phone for me one time. So it's all
Oh,
via text message. So I'm like,
yeah.
so I was telling my broker, I'm like, we'll see how this goes because I don't even know how to read him. He won't even answer his phone. So,
Yeah.
it can be, it can work out really great. And I've done it before and it's totally worked out fine. But if it doesn't, you just have to understand. And the thing is families get very emotionally attached to the houses that they're buying.
Yeah.
And they just have to wrap their head around there is a chance that it could all fall apart. And they just have to then relist their house. The other one will probably sell that they wanted, and they kind of have to just start over.
Yeah, I know. It can be an emotional roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
And for most people, a house is somebody's biggest financial investment. So it is like high stakes, especially when it's a primary residence. Buying and selling is something that you don't do every day. So it really is important to have like a good team around you looking for your best interests and, sharing the little tidbits and tricks on how to plan or best mitigate any hiccups. I mean, there's always going to be hiccups here or there, but how do you like prevent or address when they do happen?
Yeah, and I think one thing that is very important that you need to understand as a buyer, if you can't close on your property unless yours closes, you need to make the offer contingent. And that's very important in order to get your earnest money back because, if you just can't sell your property and you didn't make that offer contingent, you don't really have the grounds to back out of the contract because you said you were qualified and you didn't even let them know about this other property. So you have to make a contingent offer if you need it to close.
Yeah. And what do you see in your market? Do you see, like, let's just say a seller and a buyer have an accepted offer and the buyers, their home isn't selling and it wasn't contingent, but they say, sorry, we can't, buy now. We can't buy your house now. We can't perform on our contract. Do you see those sellers going after your buyers, or do you see those sellers saying, I don't want to tie up my property any longer. Let's just sign a cancellation. I want to get it back on the market. Like that's kind of a risk, and usually in our area, we see sellers saying like, I'm mad, that sucks, but let's just get it back on the market because otherwise it's tied up with legal, proceedings on who's going to, hold up their end of the contract or not. So it is like an interesting discussion for sure.
It is. I wouldn't want to take the risk personally, but they could. I'd say most sellers probably would just say, let's get it back up, right? But there's always that guy that's like, I'm going to get them and get my money and, that kind of thing too, right?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to mess with it. Plus, I think just in the earnesty of being honest, you should let them know if it's contingent. I mean, for me, like if my house was going to be closing in the next 5 days, then I probably wouldn't make a contingent offer because by then all your ducks are in a row. The chances of them backing out, in Arizona, at least you have a 10-day window where you can cancel for any reason on the first 10 days. And so I probably wouldn't then, but if I'm in like week 1, week 2, even week 3, and we still have some time to go and I don't have a clear to close from the other lender, then I just think, you want to be honest about it because a lot of things, like what if you back out of the deal and then you do sell your home and you want to offer on the same property again? If you lied to them initially, they're going to be like, no, you know what I mean? They're not going to want to work with you. Where if you just fill out of your contingency, but then now, you're going to wait. Now you have another contingency or you have a closed offer. Then they're like, well, we like this person. And of course we want to still sell it to you because they knew going in that you were in a contingency.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that because you never know. You might approach the same house twice. That happened last year within our office. There was we had the seller and another agency brought the buyer, and then those buyers backed out after they had an inspection, whatever. They said it was just cold feet. Well, we think they went and offered on another property that had came up. They did not get that property. So like a week or two later, they come back to property number one, be like, just kidding, we changed our mind. And they ended up buying it. But those sellers were so frustrated because they lost time on market. They lost, potential other buyers. And it just took a lot longer than what it maybe would have originally had those, buyers been up front with that seller. It would have just been a lot more smoothly. At the end of the day, it closed, but it was not pleasant.
Yeah, I always think honesty in everything in life is the best policy because,
Yes.
I had a client last night or a couple nights ago, the one I told you we got an offer accepted. We made an offer on 2 different properties. And the one that we didn't pick, I called the realtor and I said, listen, we made an offer. We made an offer on 2 properties and we took the other one. However, we still have to get through the inspection. We still have to do X, Y, and Z. So don't assume your offer is a no. It's just a not right now. And I'll keep you posted in the next couple of weeks because I don't want to lie. And I don't want to BS her. I mean, it was honest. And I told her, I go, the price we got on this house, it's not even worth it to counter because you're at 560, they're at 525. I didn't tell her the numbers, but you're never going to come down that low. So let me just get back to you. And she said, okay, that's great. But I don't like to burn bridges because you might be groveling that, this house might have major issues where we're like, oh my God, let's go back to the other house. And if we told them, oh, we weren't interested. So it sounds worse to me to be like, my client's not interested. Just kidding. Now they are interested. Then the seller's like, are they wishy-washy? The last thing I want to do is get under contract and then not get under contract. We're just telling them we took another offer and then I can come back to them later and say, actually, that house had a zillion issues and it fell out of contract. Now we're interested in your house, and that just, to me, it's like honesty is always the best policy. And, it's just a communication. Plus, I don't like to burn bridges with other realtors because I might run into that realtor again on another deal. And if she's like, oh, this is the girl that, I send her this great deal and then her people aren't interested, she doesn't work with good clients that are really serious about buying. So, it's always good to just not burn those bridges and not work with a realtor that burns bridges.
Well, and one thing that I see that it differentiates some agents and clients is there's always like an agent that 99% of the time they use an inspection as a fix-it list for the sellers. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that is not the purpose of an inspection. It's to educate the buyer of the home on any things they should be anticipating. It's to find things that are hidden or that you can't see in plain sight. But when clients of an agent consistently ask for, hey, this cupboard door is creaky. Hey, I noticed this little, issue that's in plain sight when you walk through the house. It's like, okay, an inspection is not that. It's health items, safety items, things that you can't really see with a naked eye or, something that you might test like electrical outlets or something like that you're not going to test every outlet at a showing. It's things like that where it could make all of the difference if an agent has worked with, certain agents before. It's not always about the price, and you have to look at it holistically. And I don't know, right or wrong, it's kind of like it happens.
Yeah, and it's important, to walk through all of that. And I want to go over some of the biggest mistakes people make because these things can make this very, very stressful when it doesn't have to be. And the number one is shopping before you know your equity.
Absolutely. Your equity is like this phantom number, you have an estimate of equity, I have great equity in my house, but actually what is that equity? Because if let's say you paid $200 for your house how many years ago and it's worth $450 now, your equity is not $250 or $250,000. By the time you sell, maybe it's 200 or maybe it's 175, depending on what you have to pay off or any other outstanding bills, the cost of selling. So having that phantom number or estimate of equity is a lot different than getting a conservative estimate from an agent on after your closing costs. Here's, within very good reason, what you would roughly walk away with, so don't count on the phantom number. That's just an estimate.
Exactly. And another one is not having backup housing. So I think this is a big one because cash buyers, this, they can close in 5 or 10 days. And, some people, like want that. You know what I mean? Like some people are like, nope, we have to close in 10 days. I have a 1031. I don't have an option. And
Yeah.
people have to understand that, you know, you don't want to like have to look for a backup plan 10 days out. And,
No.
you know, rentals are expensive. You know, this is all part of your cost. Like, do you have family you can stay with? Do you have a friend you can stay with? If you don't, you're going to be getting a last minute Airbnb. I know in the Phoenix area during prime season, minimum for a month in an apartment is $7,000. I mean, minimum. I mean, it's like 15
That's
to 20.
so
Yeah.
unfathomable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're peak season. You know, I'm dealing with an insurance claim now. And so we were looking at houses to rent for the month. They're $25,000 to $30,000 for just a house. So you don't want to just, you know, have to pay that out of your proceeds. That'll eat away so quickly. So, you know, I know the family is staying with, or the family I'm buying from is staying with family. They're moving in with their family for a little bit. So you just have to, you want to have all that planned out. And another option that you can do is lease back your own house, but people hate doing that.
People hate doing that, and it does open up a can of liability, which, you know, there are forms and some protections that you can put in place, but, you know, they don't plan for every single scenario that can happen. So it's just a risk. You know, it does have upside, but it also has downside. I think one thing people also make the mistake of is underestimating their moving logistics. And I have a prime example of this that I would love to share.
Yeah.
I had clients that were in the process, they were moving from Minnesota to like Alabama. And they're like, well, the moving truck's going to show up. Like, when do we get our money? And I'm like, you don't get your money until closing. And they're like, well, we need $1,500 so the moving truck will come. Otherwise, we can't load our stuff. And they were like flat broke. Like they were literally on their last dimes to move down by their family down south. And so it's like, oh my gosh, like, you know, I explained how this works, but they clearly weren't grasping it. And it was like 3 days before closing. So I got on the phone with the moving company and I said, okay, here's the deal. It's a solid thing. I put down $500 to like get them there. And then I put the other 1,000 on the closing statement. So that moving company knew that like, hey, if they close, you know, they're getting a check at closing. And so they got the check at closing. I got, you know, the clients paid me back after they got their money. But it's like, that was a logistic. That moving company doesn't owe anybody anything. Like they're not local. They don't know the people. They're not going to just move your stuff and, you know, maybe get payment later, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, that's a logistic that you have to plan ahead for.
Well, there's other logistics too, you know, like sometimes a buyer wants you to fix things before they move in. Now, sometimes they'll take a credit at closing, which is nice and easy. But if they actually want you to fix things, then you have to come out of pocket for that and be able to afford to fix those items, you know, in order for them to close. And yeah, there is a lot of logistics. And the other thing is the contract coordination. So you know, I was working with a seller one time and she just decided she wanted to close, like, I think it was like 5 days later. And I was like, you can't just decide that. She goes, well, I like this one moving company and this is the only day that they're free. And so she was, you know, dead set, like I'm not moving any earlier. And luckily the buyers were okay with that and it all worked out. But, you know, when you run into hiccups, well, as a seller, you can't just decide that. So she would have been in trouble if they wouldn't have agreed to it. But the other thing is that it throws everything off because like you were saying, that train. So if she closes 5 days late, then you close 5 days late. You know, everyone that needs the money for the next purchase has to close on the same time. You know, they can't close before. So, you know, so it can really set things off, kind of a train wreck. Do you think that people, like, when you talk to them, like say you have a family that's moving and they have to move this certain day because they're traveling across the country. I mean, do you prep them like this could get delayed, so you need to be a little bit flexible here?
Yes, 100%. I always have that conversation ahead of time where it's like, okay, you're going to be copied on everything. We're going to be in touch early and often with the bank, with the title company, with the other side. But so we think everything's going to go fine, but you need to have a plan in case something gets kicked back. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like scheduling closings for Fridays. And here's why. Because if a wire doesn't get in on time or if something doesn't happen, then you're waiting over all weekend through Monday. Where if you have it scheduled on a Tuesday, okay, well, it's just Wednesday then. We can figure out something for 12 hours, you know, the next business day. So we try to mitigate things like that ahead of time, but always have a plan B. And I did have family that, you know, to no fault of my own or their own, it was just a glitch in the process. They had to hotel it with 4 kids. It's like, okay, I'm ordering you guys pizzas. Like, you're go swimming, go have fun.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
we can't change it, and it was something out of our control. But at least, you know, we had that conversation ahead of time, so they weren't irate and totally pissed. You know?
Yeah, and you just have to be flexible. Especially, it's really hard with families, right? Because it's different than it's just a couple and they're like, okay, we can just go stay with a friend, or we can go stay with my aunt, or, you know, when you start to have a bunch of kids, it complicates things because it's a lot more of an ask to stay at somebody's house.
Well, and they had like dogs. They had like 2 or 3 dogs
the
and
dogs.
2 cats. And I'm like, oh, all the kids and all the farm, essentially.
They're all packing up in the van and but the thing is that I think that you should have a backup plan in case it doesn't close. So like whether that's your aunt or it's a certain hotel or a friend or something, you should have something knowing that, hey, this might happen. And sometimes it happens last minute. Like sometimes it's like, you know, mortgage lenders are the worst at trying to tell you when they're going to close. Like they give you loan status updates, but they're kind of full of it a lot of times. So, you know, you think everything's good until 5 days before closing. They're like, well, actually, we might need another week or 2 because we still haven't gotten this approval yet, or we have to do another appraisal or whatever. And you're like, oh my God, my stuff's packed up. Like the movers are scheduled. Everything's put away. Like everything's in boxes. You know, we plan to, you know, eat out the next 2 nights because then you know what I mean? And it's like, well, no, now we're delayed a week or 2 and you're just sitting there like, what? So just until it is literally like until the docs are signed, which sometimes happens a few days before closing, like, it is just not a done deal.
No. Always waiting, always anxious. And if like sellers sign ahead of time, I always say like, okay, I'm going to text you or call you as soon as I, you know, get the thumbs up from the title company that we're signed and closed. And, you know, whatever's going on, and everybody, like, you just breathe a sigh of relief. Like, okay, we're done. Congrats. Let's rock on.
Yes. Let's have fun now. Like now's the fun part, right? So
yes, time to celebrate.
Yeah. You just can't be stressed about this though. I mean, and you know, Tara and I below, we have our buyer and seller guide, and that's going to help you walk through the process. Just make sure you have a realtor that's walking you through all of this, and you're making offers the correct way. You're not putting your earnest money at risk. You're not making a mistake where you buy something and then you can't sell your house and you're in this horrible bind. You just really need to understand all the risk and reward for any any option that you choose.
And the earlier that you start the process, especially when you have a sell and then a buy, or a buy and then a sell, the better you are, the more prepared that, you know, we can be together. So awesome stuff.
Yeah, follow us on Instagram and we'll see you guys later.